Alright, and before we get started, I just want to give you a little background info on PLEX. It's kind of got an interesting history. PLEX actually is an acronym. It stands for Panasonic Laser-Based Entertainment Extravaganza. So way back when they were doing laser discs, Panasonic had this guy right here. Now this guy is the LX-K700U multi-laser disc player, and also a karaoke machine. It was both. And so PLEX was initially the software that ran this machine. Very interesting. Eventually, legal battles ensued, and it was made. It was actually given up by Panasonic to another company, and then eventually it became the PLEX media software that we all know and love today. So I just thought that was pretty cool and interesting. I thought I'd let you all in on that little secret. So now let's go into playlists for PLEX. Alright, hello. Today we are going to talk about PLEX playlists. PLEX, playlists in general, specifically how you make them in PLEX and some stuff you can do to make the playlists, usable, functional, serve a purpose for your viewing pleasure. Particularly, I use them in a way that I don't know if a lot of other people do. I come from a quote-unquote background, home media background of using XBMC back in the day. Now it's called Kodi, with a pseudo TV plugin that basically takes your local media and turns it into a live TV kind of experience with different channels. You can do commercials and all this really cool stuff, scheduling. And the development on that kind of stopped for a while, and it's kind of picked back up. It's being actively worked on when the developer has time, but I don't know how functional it is in its current state. I haven't used XBMC in a good bit since I switched to PLEX. Before that, even I used a Linux one that I do not remember the name of, but it had a very fun interface. And that was like late 2000s. And then I went to XBMC and then Kodi. And so I don't currently, there is a pseudo TV-like extension for PLEX that's called Disque TV that I believe works with some other things like MB. I think it can be implemented in a couple different media software, I think. I haven't delved too much into Disque TV. I'm kind of like making my library exactly how I want it to be so that I can start that up again. But I was really into pseudo TV, really into it. I love tinkering with stuff, especially software stuff and organization stuff, and so that was something I really got into. And so, in a similar vein, when I make a playlist, my intention for that playlist is to be basically like a pseudo TV Lite kind of setup. So I can just sit down and go, I need something playing, let me put this on, or, I just want to watch some sketch comedy. Let's just play some sketch comedy and just have it go to town. That's what I like, that's what I use it for. That's my approach. Last time I talked about collections and how collections can be used in PLEX to really give you some structure to your library. And, I think that there's a lot of value in there. Collections and playlists are basically the same thing. So let's just do a brief little overview. PLEX uses a couple different ways to store your media and organize and present it to you. Libraries are like the main top level. Libraries have basically one single type of media in them, whether that's audio or video, and then video is split up between specifically movies and television. This is a little picture of my current libraries. We got movies, television, online video. Online video is stuff that I've saved from YouTube. A lot of it will be not like podcasts or news shows, even if there are ones I really like on there. But they're basically like fiction shows in most cases. And that stuff is very difficult to to archive in PLEX because PLEX is hesitant to let the user arbitrarily add stuff to libraries. You kind of can. And then music and storytelling. Storytelling is a podcast that I archive, as well as like old-time radio shows that I love, and also modern-day podcasts that are story-based. Whether that's like full-cast audio drama type stuff, or a single narrator, narrations, reading stories. Anything like that goes there, and that's separate from music. And those are big high-level things. Those, all they do is whatever you put in there, they keep them in there. And then once they're in there, you can add collections, which are manually curated or automatically curated groups of content within a single library, mostly. Like I said in the last video, if you've got a collection in multiple libraries that has the same name, when you are viewing one of those collections, it will have the content from the other collections at the bottom of that page, which is very useful, basically because it's the only way to jump from library to library if you're just browsing through and trying to figure out what you want to watch. So you can go to your science fiction collection in your movies, for example, and then you're going through it and you're not seeing anything, and then you start to see the TV shows at the bottom. And maybe you'll jump into one of those, or you might see maybe sci-fi, old-time radio plays at the bottom if you've got a sci-fi collection in your audio library. The implementation isn't the best, but it's serviceable, I think, for providing that sort of interconnection between the libraries that you don't get anywhere otherwise. Because like when you sit down and you kind of have an idea of what you want to watch, maybe you just want to watch a horror thing, you still have to pick where do you start when you search, Do you start in the horror movies, go to the horror movies, and, so there's still some decisions to be made. And, up at the bottom, and then collections are just like, they've got some interesting ways that you can view them. You can have them in the main movie library as well, or they all exist on their own collections tab, and you can kind of pick and choose how those collections are viewed. So you can kind of hide them, which means you can make some really niche collections that you might not want on the main library page, but you still got them there if and when you want to get to them. So pretty neat, pretty interesting. Playlists are basically the same. They're very similar to collections. The difference is how they're presented to you. So libraries house one type of content, and you can have multiple libraries with the same type of content to, separate them even further out if you want. And then collections take that stuff and give you nodes within the library that you can click through to get to different things. So like you can do a collection that's genre based, all fantasy stuff, all the medical drama shows that you fucking love, cooking shows, right? You can have in 1980s, anything from the 80s in there. You can have a collection that's just anything that's been released in the last 6 months in your library, right? You can do it by studio or network. You can have all the Kids in the Hall projects on there. So when you want to watch Death Comes to Town or Carpoolers, some of the greatest comedy of the last 20 years, you can just do that easily, right? And then you can have a Star Trek collection that collects every single Star Trek thing you have in your library. That's very cool. And then if you want to go further, you can do like 4 or 9 or however many Star Trek collections you need to have the earlier shows, the 90s shows, all the 4 or 5 new Star Trek shows. You can do it however you want, right? So very cool. And all of this stuff that collections can do, playlists can do as well. The difference is really in the interface. So playlists never show up in the main library tab. They always have their own playlist tab. They don't go away from there. So that's a barrier because, or not a barrier, but that's one of the things that separates them from collections is that you really have to think, oh, I've got this playlist I want to watch. Right? You're not going to just stumble upon a playlist, whereas you might see a collection in your collections tab that you don't normally see because it's not in your libraries tab and all that sort of stuff. So there's some mental, some thought that has to go into if you want to put on a playlist, I guess, because of that sort of isolation. Playlists also don't let you mix libraries at all. So you cannot, if you have two playlists, for example, with the same name that are built out of different library content, they're separate playlists. There is no way to combine them. So the biggest caveat is that you cannot have a playlist that has movies and TV shows in it, for example. Which is kind of big, although I'm more of a TV guy. I'm probably not going to put on a playlist of movies necessarily. But that's me personally, and there will be people who will think that's a much bigger detriment to the PLEX system than I do. So it just depends on personal preference, really. Now, so we can do like the smart collections and the static regular collections, same thing with playlists. And you make them in exactly the same way. You go to a library, in this case we're up in here in the movie libraries, you go all right here to bring up this drop down so you can filter stuff. And you go down to the advanced filters. So this, for example, would be a playlist or collection or whatever you want, but for this case I'm just going to, from now on, I'm just going to say playlist. That takes all of the horror stuff from the last 12 months that has aired, takes out the comedy and the documentary stuff, and leaves you with whatever's left. So, actually, I'm not sure why I put documentary up here. This probably should be like animated or anime, perhaps, depending on how you have your library set up. Because generally for stuff like horror and sci-fi in particular, but I tend to do it for all the genre-based playlists. I'll separate out comedy, anything that's matched with horror and also matched with comedy. If they have both of those genres, I don't want it in the horror playlist, because that's a different tone than the other stuff that generally I wouldn't be in the mood for if I'm going to go into the horror playlist. And then this would be animated, although maybe I did it like this because I do have documentaries that are also tagged horror. I don't know, but usually that would be animated because I'd want those in most cases to be their own playlist. And even then, for animation, I would often separate those out from like adult sort of animation versus, more general audience animation. So like Simpsons or Family Guy or, Bob's Burgers or whatever, I might not want those in the same playlist as I would want something like Nickelodeon shows, Again, personal preference, but something you can do. Although that's a little more difficult because that's probably not going to be a genre tag that's added to stuff that you include in your library automatically. So there's some manual footwork you got to do in that case, which is fine. You just kind of have to be up on it and just keep that in mind when you're adding stuff. So you go save as, and you got collection, smart collection. There's some recent collections that I've made at the time of taking the screen cap, which was a good while ago now. But and then you got add to playlist and save as smart playlist. So let's go down here. So you save it as smart playlist. Go to the playlist tab. It'll be in there. You can actually add artwork for the cover of the playlist. As of the time of this recording, that is not respected in any front end client that I have, it only seems to be respected in the web client. Everything else just does the four, like, the little, like, collage of four covers like you see here, but except squished to be a square. So hopefully that gets added into the other clients so you can have a visual representation and kind of a guide. I've gone through and I've made some really simple, as you can see, just color and text artwork for a playlist that I use, using color coding as a time frame. So anything that's green is going to be fresh, which is within the last 12 months in this case. I think usually that's about what I have it in. I don't get around to watching a lot of new stuff with work and all that, so 12 months for me is pretty new. Here is literally the same exact screenshot that I just had up there for some reason. Okay. And so when you get down to it, you sit down on your couch and you're just like, oh, I just want to put something on. I need something. I just want to put something on and just sit here and drink some lemonade and just unwind. So that's when you shuffle. Oh, you know what? There is a crucial thing missing from these, and I don't know why I skipped that. Do I have it later on? Yeah, I've got it later on. So, and then you shuffle it. And it's a poor man's TV channel that you can kind of structure however you want. Now, as I mentioned before, some of the more advanced stuff, software and plugins that are made specifically to emulate live TV, go like really advanced. Scheduling, you can specify commercials to play between the shows and all that sort of stuff. If you don't need that, and I suspect a lot of people probably don't need, the commercials and stuff, I love it. I love setting it up. I love going through and just really creating experiences for each channel. And I love making really weird channels that have like niche stuff where it's like I'm working on a comic, or I'm writing stuff, or doing some research and I just need background noise, or I want something playing off to the side, and I'll have weird like training videos ripped from YouTube or archive.org for like different jobs and stuff like that. I just like weird stuff. So maybe that's not for everyone, but I love it. But like I said, I've just been using PLEX playlists lately for like the last couple years. It's fine. The biggest downfall is that, as far as I can see, there's not a way to tell it to spread out the shows. So if you've got like Walking Dead, which has been on for 75 years, in your horror playlist, you might get kind of frustrated when it just completely overtakes the playlist and it's like 4 episodes of Walking Dead for every 1 episode of any other show. I don't have a solution for that right now. When doing stuff like playlists and XBMC or Kodi, you could basically nest playlists. So you can make a playlist for Walking Dead that whenever it's accessed only shows you 10 episodes or 6 episodes or whatever. And then you do that for all the shows, and then you do one playlist that basically grabs all the stuff from those other playlists. And that gave you some real granular control on how often you want the shows to show up. You could make, like, you could increase the frequency. You could say, yeah, basically most shows are going to have like 5 episodes that will be pulled from them. Except for this show, which only has X amount of episodes. I'll have it pull more so that it comes up a little more often because it's not a big show. Something like that. You have a lot of control, which you don't get with PLEX. Whether or not that matters for you, again, that's, just preference. Boop, 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 boop. So, there was some stuff that I left out of the first screenshots, and they're mainly the first like playlist rules screenshots, and basically I'll be able to show you those right now. So as you can see right here, this is an advanced filter for shows that aired between 2018 and 2020 that have a TV PG rating and that have not been played in Plex. So this will only give you shows that aired in these 2 years with this rating that have not been viewed in Plex. So that means if you go and you shuffle this, sit down, watch a few episodes, the next time you sit down and shuffle it, those episodes you watched will not be there. They won't show up again. You won't get repeats. That's super cool. Not only can you do episode unplayed is true or is not, you can also do episode last played, not in the last 18 months. So like for this example, which of course, as you can see, is a non-comprehensive list of Kids in the Hall shows, or shows where a kid in the hall has appeared on. Twitch City, fantastic, fantastic show. If you haven't seen it, go find it. And just a heads up, this screenshot was taken before the most recent season of Kids in the Hall, which is why it's not on there. Which is also fantastic. Go watch it so they can make another season. Episode last played, not in the last 18 months. So when you watch an episode, Plex keeps track of that. And they keep track of not just whether or not you watched it, where did you stop in it, right? If you only watched half of the episode, you can hop on your, your mobile phone, or web browser, or a different client, and just pick up right in that same spot. It keeps track of everything. It also keeps track of when you finished that episode last. So the most recent watch of a given episode or movie. So if I sit down, I put this on for a few hours, next time I do that, it's not going to include episodes that I've seen unless I haven't seen them in a really long time. And you can change this for however, many months, weeks, days even that you want. I would say that's the value you put there is probably going to be determined by how large the playlist is. If it's a really large playlist, then yeah, do 18 months, do 2 years, If it's a shorter playlist that you enjoy and you can watch, more frequently, do it less. Do it like 3 months or something. And also the content, right? Like sketch comedy, I can watch that like I listen to music, right? I'll watch the same sketch. It doesn't matter if I've seen it a couple days previously. I still love it. I still get value from it. So I watch sketch comedy pretty frequently. And so that's probably going to be a much lower number, even though it's a very large playlist. Again, it's all personal preference and how you think of your media and how you determine what it is you want from your experience, And like I said, I'm not always sitting down on my couch watching stuff. Sometimes I just need to have something playing off to the side while I'm working on other stuff. And then I'll, spin over every so often and watch a little bit when my attention gets grabbed or something like that. Plex, playlists in Plex versus others. So Kodi had XSP files for their playlist, .xsp. These were physical files on your drive that it used for the playlist. Plex does not do that. Plex stores all your playlists in its internal database. So you can't share them easily, aside from taking screenshots of your settings, your rules. You also can't make one playlist and copy that to do a variation of it. So even though the fresh horror playlist really needs just one thing to be changed to make it into another genre, you just have to go through and do all those 3, 4, 5 rules again over and over and over and over, and it's maddening. There might be a third-party tool to help with that. I don't know. I haven't seen any. I think that's a pretty big one. And like I mentioned before, XBMC, Kodi would let you nest playlists. So as you can see in this one right here, Adult Swim. So all shows sci-fi, all movies sci-fi. I'm pretty sure that name is incorrect. Released in the 1980s. So this playlist right here would have a rule that just grabs everything released in the 1980s. This playlist here grabs all movies that are sci-fi. This playlist here grabs all shows that are sci-fi. And then again, this name clearly isn't accurate name. This was just a copy and paste from an old file I had, so I don't know if it was something I actually used or not. So just to recap, like, what's missing from what I want out of this sort of live TV experience that the playlists system doesn't give me? Something simple like movie and show integration. You can't have a playlist that has horror movies and horror shows, for example. I don't know why. I can't imagine it's a technical reason. I mean, I don't know. PLEX is just a weird company, especially lately. Flex content, which is commercials or maybe music videos, news clips, trailers, anything like that. I know I used to love MTV playlists with all those old shows we all love, and then in between there's a music video too. Really nice. You can't do scheduling. So like, you know, maybe you want to have like the rated R horror stuff to appear only from like 10 p.m. to 2 or something at night, and then you want more quote unquote family friendly horror stuff on the other day or whatever, other time of day. You can't do middle of the night infomercials on channels. You can't do a specific block of early morning cartoons, or have your SNCC shows only play at 7 or whenever they air it, like at Saturday night or whatever. So a lot you can't do. It's very unfortunate. But for a lot of people, I think setting up some playlists that really just give them, some sort of lightweight, quote-unquote, channels to tune into, stations, is a really good way to kind of, I guess, repurpose some of your library. It might even let you, it might let some stuff reemerge that you hadn't watched in a while, or maybe you forgot you had if you've been doing this for a long time and you've got a large collection, a large media collection going. There's going to be stuff that you've had for 10, 15 years that you haven't seen, but you loved, and I think this is an interesting way that you can potentially resurface some of that stuff, because I think you can even, I think one of the rules that you can do is, you might be able to do episode count. I'd have to go and look into that. Maybe you can only add shows that have, X amount of episodes, and so you've got a playlist that's kind of like, 1 or 2 season shows that were canceled. Even if you can't do that with the rules themselves, you can easily manually add shows. And so you just, you can filter your main library, and then you just add the actual individual shows. Where'd that go? The individual shows. Yeah. So if you've got any questions, let me hear them. I'll try and give you an answer or a helping hand or point you in the right direction if I can. This is something that I really enjoy. And not just the end result of it, even though I love, obviously, the end result of, organizing my media and structuring it in a way that I can use. And so I want to help others do the same. I think it's something that's not really talked about too much. It's really, it's like the conceptual sort of abstract thinking. of it isn't talked about too much. There's a lot of technical discussion going on with the software and its limits and how to do certain things, but not too much in the personal, sort of aspect of it, and how everyone is gonna have different requirements for it. And I want to help with that sort of abstract sort of part. Yeah. So, what I'm gonna try to be doing soon, I'm setting up a new PLEX server that's just a small test server, basically, just running on my local computer. Normally my PLEX server runs on my network attached storage box. And I'm going to be going through and just building out a library for educational content, tutorials, stuff like that. And I'm just going to record myself doing it, thinking out loud how to structure things, what do I do, what's the top level TV show stuff versus the collection stuff. Do I, it's fairly complex, I think, and again, it all just is determined by how you think about the content. So, we'll see how that goes when I get around to that. And especially doing it through PLEX is kind of challenging because, again, PLEX doesn't like you to put stuff in it that doesn't have IMDb entries, TVDB entries. That's its whole thing, and it's great in some respects, not great in other respects. So I'm going to be doing a lot of kind of basic show and tell type stuff, and quote unquote tutorials on the ways that I get YouTube stuff